Hey, what's up guys? JayzTwoCents here, and CES was a lot of fun, but of course it's time to get back to work. Now, as you may or may not recall, a few months ago I built myself a new test bench which I called Project Bloodshed. You know, because the coolant made it look like blood and stuff. Now, I had a pretty sweet red and gunmetal theme going on, but unfortunately the X99 Deluxe didn't really match all that well. So when ASRock contacted me asking if I was interested in taking a look at one of their new X99 motherboards, I was all over that X99X killer fatality board. It is definitely a sexy piece of hardware. With its improved radiator support and legendary noise optimization, the new Define R5 from Fractal Design is a PC builder's dream come true. Click the link in the description to learn more. Now, motherboards are one of those things that I don't really feel they get enough attention. I mean, sure, raw CPU power, video cards, RAM, and all that stuff is direct contributors to the overall PC speed and experience. But let's not forget that none of those devices can communicate without a motherboard. And seeing that the motherboard is also tasked with things like power delivery to the CPU, PCI Express components, hard drive communication, fan control, overclocking, it's something that needs to be paid attention to. Now, when it comes to choosing the right motherboard, trust me, manufacturers know this, which is why they keep packing more and more features to try and entice buyers to notice their particular models. Now, ASRock is one of those brands that I don't feel is really given enough regard when it comes to do-it-yourselfers. In fact, when I purchased my ASRock Z77 OC formula back in 2013, I really was concerned that I was making a mistake, since that brand really doesn't carry as much prestige as, say, Asus, MSI, or Gigabyte. But man, the more I played around with the board, the more I realized that ASRock really does take what they do serious. Now, I could easily spend all day going over the specs of the FATAL1TY X99 killer. So instead, I'm going to go ahead and focus on some of the main points that I think make this board really interesting. Now, first off, many X99 motherboards currently only support up to 64 gigabytes of DDR4, but the killer supports up to 128 of ECC and non-ECC RAM 3000 megahertz plus. Now, I already hear you.
Jay, why would we want 128 gigabytes of RAM? That's so overkill for gaming.
Well, you're right, but remember, the X99 platform is already overkill for gaming and really appeals more to the content creator and editors and other workstation-grade builders, many of which can and do benefit from more RAM. So that's one thing that I love about this board, is the fact that it contains things that appeal to both sides of that spectrum, making it easy to have an all-encompassing build suitable for both gamers and workstation needs. The overclocking on this board is pretty straightforward due to the very easy to navigate UEFI BIOS without getting all crazy and overcomplicated like some other brands on the market. But not only is the BIOS easy to navigate, the power delivery is up to par as well, with 60 amp power chokes, Nichicon 12K Platinum Japanese capacitors, 12-phase power delivery, and oversized heat sinks, keeping everything nice and cool. Now, we'll definitely be overclocking this bad boy and giving some feedback at the end of the video regarding how it all went, especially compared to the X99 Deluxe motherboard which it's replacing. Now, something else worth noting on this motherboard is that it has got a dual gigabit LAN, one being the Intel i218V and the other being the Qualcomm Atheros Killer E2200 for gaming. Now, they advertise that the E2200 is capable of prioritizing gaming packets which increase gaming speed and reduce the lag, and actually prioritizes all the information based on the games that you're playing. I have no way to test this claim, but at the very least, having two Ethernet NICs is good to have a backup in case one fails, so there is that. Now, for audio, the X99 killer features Purity Sound 2.0 and 7.1 channel HD audio output, has the Realtek ALC 1150 codec. And if you're like me and happen to be running some power-hungry cans for audio, it also features a powered headphone amplifier that can drive up to 600 ohms of impedance. And since high-end audio is becoming more and more affordable, having a headphone jack like that is actually pretty nice to see. Now, when it comes to graphics, this board does feature 3 PCI Express Gen 3 16X slots and 2 Gen 2 1X slots, along with SLI and Crossfire support. Now, since this motherboard does not have any sort of PLX chip, Can become a little bit confusing on how the lanes operate when using a 5820K CPU with 28 lanes versus the 40 lanes found on the 5930K and the 5960X. So rather than overcomplicate this video by mentioning all the various combinations of Gen 2 and Gen 3 lane utilization per CPU, I'm just going to refer you to the motherboard's manufacturing specs and their website to figure out how it's going to work for you. But one thing worth noting is that three-way crossfire and SLI is not supported on the 5820K, which is kind of a bummer because it could if it had PLX, which has actually been very popular on the Z97 series, allowing many brands to offer up to four-way SLI or crossfire on CPUs that otherwise couldn't handle it. Now for storage, the killer features 10 SATA 3.6 gigabit per second ports, RAID 0, 1, 5, 10, and Intel Rapid Storage 13, but they also have this thing called HDD Saver. Basically, you power your hard drives off the motherboard instead of the power supply, allowing you to control when they turn on and off via software. Now they say it's for added security and longer lifespan of hard drives, without letting them spin at all times. Personally, this is something I don't really find all that interesting. I don't keep important storage on my local machine, and I don't know how useful you guys would find that, but it is a function in here. And unfortunately, the downside of it is you have to use a pretty ugly proprietary cable, which is not sleeved or anything. But ASRock is really proud of this function, so I may have figured it's at least worth mentioning if you find that to be kind of cool. Now also worth mentioning is it does have Ultra M.2 socket supporting SATA 3.6 gigabit per second, as well as an M.2 PCI Express Gen 3x4 for 32 gigabits per second data transfer rate. Now as I mentioned, I could go all day on the features packed into this board. I mean, just look at the box. There's a lot going on there. In fact, if I picked up this box, say off the Micro Center shelf, I would probably be a bit confused of what to look at. There's a lot going on. But I mean, it's got high density power connectors for better power connections, 2-ounce copper PCB layers making it very heavy, along with a very sexy black sapphire PCB, old school PS2 connectors for gamers who love their lag-free old school mice and keyboards, a Fatality mouse port for custom polling rates, 125 Hz to 1000 Hz, Thunderbolt 2.0 ready, anti-static protection, anti-moisture protection, and the list goes on and on. So let's just go ahead and get it installed and go from there.
Transition.
So there we go, guys. The ASRock FATAL1TY X99X killer motherboard looks fantastic. It has lots of features that I actually like on there. And yeah, there's still some parts laying around. I literally just fired this one up, mess and all, just still chilling here, showing you guys I'm a pretty messy builder, which I've shown in the past before. But the killer motherboard has a lot of features that I really like. I like how the USB 3.0 are close together. I like that it actually has a USB plug built onto the motherboard that you can do a standard USB plug in. There's actually a lot of things I could actually use that for. Now I've got ASRock Engineer running here in the background, and I didn't do anything for the overclocking on this except for going into the BIOS and using one of their pre-selected speeds, which they've kind of determined already where the settings should be based on their own preliminary testing on all of their engineering samples of the different chips. Now this is 4.4 gigahertz, which is the same that I was running my test bench on with the ASUS board. But what I noticed is it's doing it at 1.308 volts. And the only way I was able to get 4.4 gigahertz stable on the ASUS was to run about 1.34 volts. So it's running less voltage and just as stable. And in fact, right now we're running currently cores in the upper 40s to mid 50s. And we are looking at a max package temperature of 68 Celsius. Right now it's sitting at 62 Celsius. And that is with a triple radiator on there, triple 30 mil radiator, which is very, very standard size. It's not oversized 45 mil or anything like that. Now, I do have a lot of fantastic things to say about the motherboard. I don't really have anything negative to say, which is very rare. I think all the features are in line. I think it gives you tons of features with a very good price point. The fact that the Intel NIC on there is Intel, Windows was able to identify that right away, so I didn't have to use a USB port or USB thumb drive or anything, because I have no optical on here. To install any of the drivers, I was able to install my Ethernet into the NIC on the Intel side, download all my drivers, be up and running, and as you can see, a motherboard swap and my Windows is still fully up and running. And that's because we're using the same controllers for the SSD, so it was actually very simple to get that migrated over. But I just want to show here using the, and it's not even automated. It's not like the ASUS, 5-way optimization where it goes through and does a bunch of tests and then fails and figures out what's stable. I just chose it in a drop down and it's perfectly stable. So we got a pretty good overclock on here, 1.1 gigahertz overclock by simply selecting a drop down menu and a button, and it's fully stable. Temperatures are great. It's not throwing a ton of voltage at it to try and do that. So I'm very happy with that. Overall, the motherboard would have been nice to see PLX on there for those extra synthetic lanes rather than, the 5820K only has 28 lanes on there, which makes some graphics card utilization a little bit difficult. 3-way is not even an option on this chip. That's too bad. But anyway, guys, the ASRock X99X killer motherboard here, the Fatality version, I think is a fantastic motherboard. In fact, it's going to be staying on this test bench. They didn't tell me I had to send it back. But either way, they're not getting it back. Guys, it's been JayzTwoCents. I hope this video has helped in some way when it comes to choosing your X99 platform motherboard. They do also have this same motherboard in the Z series, the Z97 series. So if you guys are on mainstream platform, make sure you check that out. It's got all the same functionality on there as well. It's got plenty of fan headers on there. The built-in audio on there is fantastic. In fact, I'm running all of my fans on this system directly off the motherboard itself. And the fan control software is also very, very simple to use. I think ASRock has definitely got themselves a winner on this one here. I am a genuine fan of ASRock products ever since using the Z77 OC formula, which they also have an OC formula version of this motherboard as well, which pulls out all the overclocking stops. So there you go, guys. JayzTwoCents taking a look at the ASRock X99X Killer Fatality Edition motherboard. I think I said that wrong. Fatality X99X Killer motherboard. Make sure you guys check it out if you're looking at building an X99 system tuned for gamers and overclocking. As always, guys, follow on Twitter if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next one.